Dead zones are, to most scientifically literate people, low oxygen areas in lakes, rivers, and oceans that cause the suffocation of life in those areas and result in spaces devoid of most life. The most familiar of these dead zones to Americans is probably the one in the Gulf of Mexico where the Mississippi River empties into the sea. Last year, this dead zone measured 8,776 square miles. That's slightly larger than Connecticut. It has been growing, fluctuating in size, since 1988, when it was first measured to be 15 square miles. This is a serious concern for life on Earth, and not just because it can affect economic factors, but because this is literally an area where all life dies, but the environment continues. Right? So it's the ocean that's actually spreading the chemicals and the toxicity that's continuing to kill the ocean. So you have an environment that's toxified and is now working to kill itself. And we're continuing to contribute to that. Right? So how many of these are there? Right? One big giant one's not that big of a deal. Since the 1960s, the number of these dead zones has doubled every decade. And now there are more than 450 of them occupying a coastal area worldwide the size of the United Kingdom. And this is just the 450 or so that we know and regularly measure. Some scientists estimate that there are more than 1,000 of them because there are places like coastlines that we haven't adequately studied. So it's quite possibly the case in a very short amount of time, the entire coastline area, the coastal areas of the world will be dead zones. So we'll be buffeted by areas that can't support life. This shrinks ecosystems and environments. It forces animals away from the coast. It creates algae blooms that can continue to destroy life. It toxifies coral reefs. It's like a huge problem. Right? The Arctic is another area that represents a dead zone, albeit for a different reason. As the Arctic melts, it not only dumps fresh water into the surrounding ocean, it literally disintegrates the habitat of species and people. You'll remember a few weeks ago we talked about the Alaskan village that had to relocate. There are accounts of polar bears drowning after swimming themselves to exhaustion, looking for an ice floe to get out of the water. The oldest and thickest sea ice in the Arctic has started to break up, opening waters north of Greenland that are normally frozen even at the height of summer. Twice this year, those areas north of Greenland have cracked open and spilled water. It's the first time in human scientific history that we have evidence of that. It's happened twice this year. This phenomenon, right, has occurred twice this year, and the culprit behind this phenomenon is the increase in warm winds that are driven northward by heat waves that exist in the northern hemisphere seasonally beyond when they should. Thawing permafrost will release methane and other trapped gases into the atmosphere. This will continue to exacerbate the process that is melting the Arctic. So again, you see an environment that is killing itself even as it dies, right? It's working against its longevity, its own longevity. Speaking of polar bears, who are reasonably considered the poster child of climate change, we need to acknowledge that species extinction is a problem of human activity. There are currently more than 700 species on the planet facing extinction in your lifetime. And all of their current existences as species are intimately tethered to climate change and human choices. But not just climate change and not just the choices that go with climate change. Human consumption drives species extinction even more than climate change because climate change is a factor of human consumption. It's not separate from it. So here we could talk about literal consumption. Humans are, and here I'm quoting the source material, humans are consuming hundreds of wild animals to extinction for meat, ornaments, medicines, and pets. A global crisis has been sparked by unregulated or illegal hunting and trapping, and these activities are going to result in 301 different species, from high-level primates to bats, that are likely to disappear in a generation. Experts at Oregon State University have recently conducted research, and they have warned that the decline is having a significant environmental impact and currently undermining the food security of millions of people in Asia, Africa, and South America. So when the three poorest places on the planet find their food security undermined by human activity, largely the activity of wealthy Northern Hemisphere residents, those individuals become refugees who will bring additional burdens to overburdened environments that are already being crippled by human activity. Consumption is literally consuming the planet to death, right? And we live in an insulated sort of understanding of that. Farmed poultry, chickens. Chickens make up 70% of all birds on the planet. With just 30% of those birds living in the wild, the picture is even more stark for mammals. 60% of all mammals on Earth are considered livestock and are kept and maintained by humans. This is mostly cattle and pigs. 36% of all human, or of mammals, right? So 60% of all mammals on Earth are livestock. 36% of the remaining mammals are human. That's 96% of all the mammals on the planet are humans and their livestock, which means that there are only 4% of the remaining mammals in the wild. The issue here is one of species synchronization. We exist in a nexus of attempted separation, and the result is that we can no longer reasonably fathom what our activities locally have to do with the destruction of the planet elsewhere. To say nothing of the lives of other beings, if we do not learn to rethink our existence, we are nothing more than zombies consuming the world. Our fear of strangers is precisely that we can determine how we are affected by the world because we are literally downstream from someone. Our interconnectedness makes us vulnerable, and that vulnerability makes us fearful. If we are to change in a meaningful way, we have to learn how to re-inhabit a space of extreme vulnerability defined by a sense of belonging that allows for a greater inclusion of beings into our notions of citizen, neighbor, family, and loved ones. That change starts by consuming less, but that too is not enough, because we also have to learn how to consume without the fear of being consumed.